Hi everyone, welcome back. Been a while since I've been in front of the webcam. My laptop that I used to record videos on broke down. It's dragging my feet a bit to get a webcam, but I felt it was pertinent for today because today I'm doing something a little bit different. Uh, as many know, there's a ban announcement today. This is December 16th, and I am recording my live reaction to the announcements. I have not seen it yet. I've kept off Twitter, I kept off Discord, which if you know anything about me, I'm addicted to Twitter, so that was very difficult, but I felt it was worth it. I can feel myself being very nervous now. This could make a big difference on how I view Legacy going forward, and based on how much changes, it could be a big difference, or you know, we're stuck in the same patterns. I think a lot of people, myself included, have not been super happy with the play patterns currently. It's very fast, it's very uninteractive right now, and unfortunately, it's like these fast, uninteractive, bad play patterns across a number of decks. So it's like, will WotC just look at the data and say like, oh, there's 6 decks with each having about 10% metagame share, like 5 to 10% meta share, so we're not going to do anything? Or will they say like, hey, we've noticed there's no mid-range decks here, we've noticed there's no control decks here, we've noticed that Lightning Bolt is not a playable card right now because of Psychic Frog, all these things. Anyway, I'm gonna jump into it. I'm gonna load this. Standard, no changes. Pioneer, Jangata is banned. Modern, they hit a lot. Wow, they hit a lot in Modern. I will definitely get into this first. My webpage is beautifully clipped Legacy. So this is either going to be no changes or we'll see. Psychic Frog is banned. Vexing Bobble is banned. Vintage, no changes. Alchemy, no changes. Everything after this is not reformed. So I'm not gonna... Okay. I will get to Modern. Let's do Legacy first. Let's read their um let's read what they wrote for Legacy. And I'm going to be honest, I think this is what I most expected to happen, where it's like these are the two clear outliers. There's so many other things that you could change or potentially hit here. Um, but these were the ones both in terms of like community sentiment and just like metagame share that stood out. All right, written by Dan Musser. With the last announcement, we banned Grief to curb the dominance of Dimir Reanimator. We achieved that to some degree, but not quite to the extent we were hoping, with Reanimator sitting at double the play rate of the next most played strategy. Maintaining a strong win rate, we believe more action is needed. Frog plays very well within the shell of the strategy, providing a threat that must be answered, also able to give you card advantage, and a discard outlet for reanimation targets. Been able to play around anti-graveyard hate, blah 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 blah. Name a Merctile list, it's very strong, it snowballs in Delver. In addition to discussing, so this is actually the thing I care most about, because I think a lot of people, myself included, are somewhat worried that this isn't going to go far enough again, which kind of sucks after back in June, everyone felt Grief should be banned, and they made no changes. And then back in August, people thought Grief and Psychic Frog should be banned, and they just banned Grief. So again, the format rotted with Reanimator. And now again, people are thinking Frog and Entomb or Frog and Reanimate should go, and now they just banned Frog. So it's like, it might keep rotting again. It's just like, how long are we gonna fucking do this? Like, frankly, Anyway, all right. In addition to Psychic Frog, we also went over some cards we could ban to reduce the strength of Reanimator, specifically Entomb and Reanimate. It was our belief that removing either would not solve the issue of Dimir Reanimator having a solid, fair game plan, as the deck leans on threat of Psychic Frog when folks are packing Graveyard Hate. Also, it is possible that the removal of either Entomb or Reanimate could be too strong a blow to Reanimator strategies, removing them from the metagame. Okay. This does not make logical sense. So, we believe that removing this would not solve the issue of Reanimator having a solid, fair game plan. Correct, because these cards don't contribute to that game plan. the reason the deck is so good is because it has a very strong plan A and a strong plan B. And the very strong plan A is turn 1 Entomb, turn 2 reanimate my Atraxa, you know. That's the strong plan A that is what forces people to play so much graveyard hate in their deck, and is why this deck can kind of wiggle between what the opponent is doing, because it's like, okay, they have 2 graveyard hate cards in their hand. Against Psychic Frog, that's effectively a mulligan to 5, right? Because those 2 cards aren't answering Psychic Frog or enacting the player's own strategy. So the reason the deck wins isn't just because it has a fair plan B. It's because the plan A is so good. So this doesn't make any sense to me. Just say you're lazy. Just say you don't want to do anything, you know. Yeah, this doesn't make any sense to me. If you nerf the plan A, then having a good plan B is less relevant, because at that point you're just a bad mid-range deck. Or, again, like, the reason that this deck is so problematic is because, you know, 4 Entombs, 2 big creatures is such an easy splash in your otherwise tempo deck. If that wasn't a thing you could do anymore, then the deck would just be a Psychic Frog mid-range deck or a Psychic Frog tempo deck, and being so one-dimensional would be very easy to target. All right. Moving on to Vexing Bauble. One of the pillars of Legacy is free counter magic. It is part of the glue that holds the format together. When certain strategies can ignore this pillar at very little cost to the primary proactive game plan, the format can begin to fall apart quickly. Decks like Forge Combo, Painter Servant, and other red Ancient Tomb decks are happy to include 1-mana artifact that can replace itself when it's no longer useful. Yeah, it is insane, egregious even, that this card cycles. Like, God forbid someone make their deck care about something in 2024 Magic. Like, this is a very powerful effect, especially in older formats, which is what Modern Horizons is aimed at, you know? Make the player putting this in their deck care about not having free spells, you know? Why is it that the Storm player can lead on this and then play Veil of Summer and then just play out the zeros? Or why is it that Prison or Mystic Forge can play this and have a blanket protection shield for whatever they want, but if they happen to draw a couple Lotus Petals or a couple Chrome Moxen, they can just cycle this and play that out. Like, they don't have to make any deck building restrictions. That was always wild to me, that this cycled. It also made it really hard to interact with. Like, okay, we hear you, you know, you can't just lean on free spells. You can't just lean on Forcible NDs. You have to actually put interaction into your deck. How do you 1-for-1 with this card? If you try to deal with this card, it just draws a card in response. Like, it just cycles in response for very cheap, you know, 1 mana at instant speed. It could have been 2 mana at sorcery speed, you know, as an example, you know, where it's like, okay, this is a very powerful effect. It can completely shut off some strategies, but if you are taking the time to interact with this card, you can actually do so in a 1-for-1 manner. It's so wild that you just had to take a -1, like, on your Prismatic Ending or your, you know, Leyline, just so that you could 2-for-1 yourself again later to force a will something. That was so crazy to me, and why we saw it was so good. I very much agree with this ban. I think it's a good hit. With Psychic Frog and Vexing Bauble removed from the format, several of the top decks will need to change. The recent success of Nadu Variant's Breakfast and Green Sun Zenith decks has us keeping a close eye on Nadu Winged Wisdom. For now, we believe today's changes to navigate the format into a more diverse and healthy position. I'm going to say respectfully disagree. How do I put this? I think this is a very important point, so I want to phrase it correctly. Legacy does not work the way it worked in, like, 2017, we'll say, where it's like, in 2017, and obviously much earlier, you know, the best card in the deck was like a tent pole. It really supported everything. It really held everything up. It was a very big pillar of the deck's success, you know. And so if you banned, like, one card out of a strategy, it would reasonably hurt that strategy. But nowadays, it's like they gave us so many strong cards that it's just like tomato tomato, you know, and like the next best thing is only maybe like a few percentage points worse, you know, where it's like, okay, the Dimir decks, they cut for a Psychic Frog, they're gonna put in 2 Tameo and like, you know, 2 of another flex spot, you know, we'll say 2 Barrowglyph, and call it a day. And like, it is worse, but it is so much marginally worse that it's not going to be a big shakeup, I don't think. I think if you don't expect Dimir Reanimator to be at the top table still, I think that's really foolish. Like, this is just not going to change anything. I think same thing with Vexing Bubble. Vexing Bubble is very powerful, but it's like the red prison decks are just going to go back to Chalice of the Void, and the Mystic Forge decks can just play Defense Grid. And it's a nerf, but it's like these decks have so many insanely powerful cards. Like, you can still turn the one ring in the Mystic Forge combo deck, right? Like, that's still a thing you can do because the one ring is still legal, you know. Prison can still turn 1 Blood Moon you, turn 2 the one ring, or, you know, turn 1 Chalice, turn 2 Blood Moon, turn 3 the one ring. Like, I guess what I'm saying is the one ring is really good, especially combined with Ancient Tomb, which is not surprising, but like, I don't think this goes nearly far enough to expect the meta to reasonably shake up. I don't expect mid-range decks to be particularly well positioned. Same with control decks. Like, control never had a problem dealing with Psychic Frog anyway. It was always the Entomb half of the deck that would give it some issue. So again, the changes are good. It's better than nothing, right? But I really don't think that Legacy is going to change very much. I truly expect to see Psychic Frog, or not Psychic Frog, but we'll say Blueback Entomb at the top table still. I still expect Red Prison to be incredibly popular and strong. Eldrazi wasn't touched at all, which is crazy to me because, like, if you want to talk about a deck that's like making it impossible to play a mid-range or control strategy, Eldrazi is like public enemy number 1 in my mind. Just like Sowing Mycospawn and Kozilek's Command and the Vindicate Eldrazi did so much for that deck. Just it just is like, how do you ever beat turn 3, destroy 2 of your lands uncounterably as a mid-range deck? You just can't do that. And I don't know, I just think that, how do I put this? Ren and 6 is a card that's fine in Modern, but too good in Legacy because of its interaction with Wasteland. And it's just really not hard to see that Sowing Mycospawn is the exact same type of card, where it's like maybe they're thinking like, oh, it's fine in Modern, you know, it gets your temple, blah, blah, blah. But I think in combination with Wasteland, in combination with Maze of Ith, you know, like the fact that you can put Maze of Ith in your deck and now it's suddenly creature removal, or you can put Bojuka Bog in your deck and now it's suddenly Graveyard Hate too. Like, one of the important balancing factors in my mind of Ancient Tomb strategies is that they aren't consistent. And so you're doing this thing very powerful, very ahead of schedule, but, you know, you lack consistency, so you can't do it every time. That's just like not true anymore between Kozilek's Command and Sowing Mycospawn. So it's just like, I don't know. I just feel like there's so many power level outliers right now in Legacy, and I don't think this is going to change very much, if I'm being quite honest. But, you know, we'll see. Metagame balancing is hard. See how things go. I personally don't think much will change, as I've said many, many times. So we'll can it. We'll tie a bow in it. All right. Modern. I know most of my audience loves Legacy, so, you know, if you don't care about Modern, you know, thank you very much for watching the video. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. For people who are interested in Modern, there's a lot here. I think that the One Ring, pretty much everyone knew it was going to go, and then there was also thought of, like, should we hit anything else from Energy? What else should we hit from Energy? I'm actually a little surprised that Amped Raptor is the choice here. Um, I guess it's an uncommon, and a Johnny is a mythic, and Ocelot Pride is a mythic. So like maybe that is part of the calculus here. Again, they have things other than format health to think about. So another thing, but still, it helps. This definitely is part of why the boards from the energy deck can, you know, play out so quickly. Gigantha is interesting. I think it makes sense. It's like just like a pretty free include in a lot of archetypes, for basically no cost. You know, it's rare that there's a cost of playing Gigantha. It's like either your deck can support it or it can't. Um, these unbans are crazy. Splinter Twin fans rejoice. Holy moly. Do I own any Splinter Twins? I think I own two, which is probably not enough. Unlucky. But yeah, for those who follow the MTG finance side of things, Splinter Twin has always been hilarious because it's like every time, like a week or two before there's a ban announcement in Modern, the price of Splinter Twin will spike. It'll go from like $2 to like $5 or $6, and then when it inevitably doesn't get banned, it goes back down again, and it's just like clockwork. And it's just like, if no one else got me, I know that my Splinter Twin price spike pre-ban announcement got me, but this time they were right. This time the believers finally paid off, which is very funny to me. Faithless Looting is also pretty wild. This is an incredibly powerful card, but I know that obviously some of the things that were working well with it before, like Hogak and Bridge from Below, are no longer legal, so maybe that's part of the calculus here. Green Sun Zenith is also incredibly powerful. You want to talk about like a consistency boost for green decks. This is kind of as good as they come. Or just turn one, Dryad Arbor, later in the game, just the best thing you put in your deck, obviously. Let's see. How much do I want to read? There's a lot here. I don't think I'm going to read the full thing. Yeah, I don't think I'm going to read the full thing here. Let's actually read some of the thoughts on the unbans. I think that is more interesting than the bans, because the bans are pretty obvious. All right. For much of Modern's history, artifact decks have been a pillar of the format, with decks like Original Affinity, KCI combo, and even Lantern Control. But it has been a while since we've seen these strategies competitively viable. We took a couple shots to elevate artifact strategies in Modern Horizons 2 and MH3, but alas, the power simply wasn't there. Opal was banned in 2020 after the introduction of Modern Horizons, included our good friend Urza Lord High Artificer. While opening hands containing Mox Opal can be quite explosive, it's not like we ever stopped printing strong anti-artifact cards like Meltdown and Wrath. Guys, I think this is a really good point where it's just like, the hate is there if you want it. Obviously, you can have an issue in a format where your sideboard is stretched too thin. Like if there's a very powerful artifact deck and there's a very powerful graveyard deck, there's a very powerful creature deck, et cetera, et cetera. Your sideboard can be stretched a little too thin. But it's not like Wrath of the Skies is you can only play it against artifacts. Like it is just a good card in Modern, so it does seem like the stop gaps are there. Also, another thing about these dorky artifacts is like Opal was played along with Oko, where the fact that this could turn into a 3/3 when you didn't need it anymore was very powerful, and obviously Oko got very good when you had material around that you could instantly turn into a 3/3. I think without Oko, definitely the floor of this card is a little bit lower. It is legendary. You can draw multiples, you can flood out, etc. So I could see this. I'm excited to see how this shakes things up. Yeah. On to Green Sun Zenith. Green Sun Zenith has been banned since 2011! 13 years! During a time where green decks were too strong, the card offered a level of consistency and flexibility that was difficult to combat, often narrowing the range of cards you'd consider playing. The logic was used to ban Gigantha this time around applies to why Green Sun Zenith was banned in the first place, but that was over a decade ago. Today's green creature-based decks are few and far between. Even Basking Brood scale combo decks can't use Green Sun to find this card because it is devoid. This is a good point. Yawgmoth has fallen off the map because we printed so many broken cards in Modern Horizons 3. And while finding Grist, Hungertide is nifty, key cards like Bowmaster, Yawgmoth, and Cutthroat are unable to be too. Can Elves make a resurgence? New to Modern reprint Sylvan Safekeeper and Symbiote might be tasty targets. Maybe old favorites like Dryad Arbor and Primetime will be entering more often. I think if you really want to make Elves modern viable, you gotta give them Glimpse of Nature back. I think I'm saying that card right. The 1-mana one that draws a card when you cast a creature spell. But I think that might be a bridge too far. Anyway, but yeah, I can see their point here. Obviously, green decks are a little bit weaker than they used to be, and it's powerful. Back in 2019, it's also a fun card. Like, it plays pretty well, I would say. Where it's like, obviously, it is a flexible card, but you're always paying that extra 1 mana, except for in the case of Dryad Arbor. Then you're just casting Llanowar Elves, basically. You are paying 1 mana for that flexibility, you know? And it does have like really interesting deck building considerations. Like, do I want any silver bullet targets here? Like, do I want to play an Oof main deck? Because then I have like 5 Oofs main deck, where it's like when I want it, but only 1 when I don't want it. What other, tutors am I looking for? What things am I interested in here? So yeah, I think this card, like, it is powerful, but it does play well. It leads to fun deck building decisions. So overall, I would say that I like this change. And yeah, we'll see how things go. It looks like I'm not reading. I'm skimming over the orange things here, and seeing that they're probably gonna use the same logic I did. That Hogek's not in the format anymore, and so looting might be safer. They all played Faithless Looting. Now, 5 years later, we're interested in seeing what Faithless Looting can do without a certain Hogak rearing its ugly head. Much like the discussion of Mox Opal, we've introduced several anti-graveyard options into Modern since Looting's removed, namely Endurance and Bogart Trawler. Yeah, playable MDFCs, that's a whole other topic that we could get into. But anyway, Faithless Looting is unbanned in Modern. It's a question of the ages. Would Splinter Twin be strong in today's Modern? Twin was banned back in 2016 after being a top of the metagame and taking down a few pro doors. The fear of tapping out into 3 open mana and dying was real. Do you hold mana open for removal or try to progress your board state in hopes of getting the game over before they can assemble the 2-card combo of Knight and Splinter Twin? History tells us that replacing Splinter Twin with Kiki Jiki Mirror Breaker doesn't cut it. I agree, it's too slow. Red tough. So, can 8 years of format evolution keep Twin combo in check? We think it can. Answers exist that once didn't, including several 0-mana cards that can keep you alive if the opponent taps out. Solitude, Force of Negation, Force of Vigor, Flare Denial. This is a really good point. I think that was the biggest issue with Splinter Twin back in 2016, is that it felt like on the other side, you had to hold up the mana cost of your removal plus 1 mana because they could tap down your removal color for like the whole game. And most decks aren't built to do that. Like, even if your removal is Path to Exile, like saying like, oh, I need to hold up 2 mana for the whole game so that I can let one of my lands be tapped, and then I can path when they Splinter Twin this thing. And even then, they might have Remand or Dispel or whatever. That was too much for decks to deal with, I felt. So this is a really good point that there's a lot of 0-mana. So we'll see if the format has evolved. Unlike Opal, Looting, and Sun, Greens, and Zenith, which can each support multiple different strategies, Splinter Twin only supports one strategy. But the whole point of today's reverse bans, or you could just call them unbans, is to call back to the Modern of yesteryear. Each card was justifiably removed from Modern in the past, but times change, and we realized that Modern isn't what it used to be. Twin is symbolic of an era of Modern that people look back on fondly, and now it is free. Enjoy the meme. Okay. I would say I largely agree with pretty much everything written in the modern unban announcement and ban announcement. This seems fun. This seems exciting. Your format seems very opened up. Why couldn't you do something like that for Legacy? Why couldn't you just give us a little bit more and like say like, hey, you know, we've heard you guys, we've heard the community. These things are maybe all at odds with each other, but they're very strong and the play patterns aren't necessarily fun and they push out a lot of other things, yada yada yada. Or maybe giving us some unbans, you know, Yawgmoth's Bargain. That 6-mana card, I don't think it's that good right now. I think you could unban that. You know, I'm not gonna get into every single card we could unban. You know, LOL Earthcraft, yada yada yada. But like the point is, they did something here that is fun and made people excited to play Modern again, which is important because people weren't. And I think that Legacy is in a similar spot, and we needed a similar reaction. And I just feel that we didn't get. This is again just kind of like the path of least resistance. Like, we're gonna make the least amount of effort. We're gonna give you just enough so that you don't actually quit the format, but not enough to actually change things because we don't play the format. We can't evaluate whether or not the play patterns are good or bad because none of us play Legacy. I think that's like kind of the biggest problem right now in my mind in terms of like Legacy format curation is like no one there actually plays the format. So why are we saying that they will know what's best? It doesn't make any sense to me. But that discussion is neither here nor there. This has gone on longer than I thought it would. But they gave us a lot. They gave us a lot of logic and reasoning. And that is something I will give them to their credit, is that they put a lot of thought into the announcements. They talked about some cards that they considered but ultimately tossed away, even if I disagree. They talked about some cards on the watch list like Nadu, which I do think will be better. It was already very good. There were 3 copies in the top 8 of Eternal Week in Europe, and a lot of the other things around it got nerfed. And you could say that if everything around it got nerfed enough that fair mid-range and control decks came back into the meta, then Nadu would not be as much of an issue because it's bad against those strategies. But it feels like, how do I put this? If the top, like, let's say the top 8 decks in the metagame, we'll rate them like 9.5 or 10 out of 10. And then these dorky little mid-range and control decks are like 7 or 8. You know, it seems like they knocked the decks not named Nadu down from like 10s to 9s, and Nadu's still a 10. So it's like these things are still at a 9, which means these dorky little mid-range and control decks of the world can't beat them, and Nadu's just better than the combo decks that it wants to see. It doesn't want to see heavily interactive decks. So yeah, that's my take. I think Reanimator will still be good. I think Nadu will still be good. I think banning a single card from decks that you just gave like 5 to 6 cards to doesn't work. And I don't think the meta is going to change much. In Legacy, Modern will be very cool. I think it is very smart of them to ban the ring at the same time that they unban Splinter Twin, because Pestermite can untap the One Ring, which is very powerful. So yeah, I think that would very clearly be a tier 1, potentially tier 0 strategy with the One Ring allowed. So I'm glad it is not. One thing I will say, specifically on Splinter Twin, is that this argument of there's a lot of 0-minute interaction in the format now is true, but the Splinter Twin decks got access to Teferi now, so that stuff don't work. You need like Boseiju, and that's vulnerable to getting your lands tapped down. So we'll see what happens. It's a powerful combo. There is more in the format against the Twin deck, but there is more in the format for the Twin deck to utilize. We'll see how things shake out. I'm excited to see how Modern develops, even though I don't personally play it very much. I wish I was excited about Legacy. I wish they gave us a little bit more, but they didn't. That's where I'm going to end it off. Excited about Modern, less so about Legacy. Don't cut Graveyard Hate from your sideboards, is what I'll say. As long as this card's legal, it's going to be broken. I will leave that at that. Bye, everyone. Take care.